Okay. Just for my benefit, how many people here are mobile versus mobile instead of web-based? Okay. And how many are developers of casino games in any capacity? Okay. So just quickly, the talk it definitely includes information about public domain and branded content. It's a big part of our strategy. But overall, I'm talking about growing horizontally instead of vertically. So a suite of casino apps instead of one monolithic app, which Dave and George just touched on a little bit. It's very clear which direction we chose, but I'm not going to try to sell everybody on that direction. It's not necessarily for everybody. I'll be very frank with some of the headaches that we face with the direction we chose. But I'll talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of each. So just jumping in, quick background. We are Super Lucky Casino, a mobile social game developer. 100% of our focus is on mobile. And we have a suite of apps. So a bingo app, a blackjack app, video poker, Vegas style solitaire, and then a number of slots apps. And just some more context and some more assumptions just to kind of pull this conversation along. We are mobile only, which means that we're reliant on the app stores for distribution. Mobile apps, not mobile web. We use Unity as our front end, which makes us cross-platform, quite obviously. We're casino only, the point being that all of our apps, even though they're separate, they're in the same general genre. Dave just mentioned how bingo and slots have very similar audiences. I'll get into that a little more. We are very lightly funded. We didn't take a large funding round, which I think informs the way we try to compete. We have to be a little more creative and view things in a less obvious way. It's not always, well, just throw $1 million of marketing at it and it'll grow. And yes, getting into the public domain stuff, that is Lil Wayne, one of the largest hip hop acts in the world, Cinderella, and then the Virgin Mary. All recognizable brands, two of which are public domain, one of which obviously isn't. So that's the context. Those are the assumptions, and I'm just going to jump right in. We're going to talk about, like I said, both the benefits and the drawbacks of having a casino suite versus one integrated casino app. I'm not even going to go through these because we'll do it slide by slide, but benefits and then the drawbacks. Okay, so jumping right in. The benefits of having a suite of apps and each app being very clearly what the game is instead of having a casino and then within that blackjack, video poker, solitaire, bingo, etc., where the app itself is the game itself. It removes a step in the conversion funnel. So historically, for an integrated casino, Double Down, Big Fish, I mean, you cannot argue with the success of those apps, but they were started in a different time with very different funding situation. You had to install the app, then open the app, then select which game you want to play, bingo, poker, whatever, and then play that game, and then become a payer. So very traditional funnel. With a disintegrated or a decentralized suite of casino apps, you remove one of those steps and it becomes a faster funnel to get users to the play than pay. This seems very simple and maybe not the biggest lever. It really is a big lever. It's been mentioned on the previous panel and others that I've heard where that lobby, that first experience that a user walks into is hugely important. And if a user doesn't see something they want to play in there, whether it's a suite of slot machines or a suite of casino apps, they're much more likely to bounce out and you will never convert them. But if you give them immediately what they want to play, then you have a much higher chance of retaining them and turning them into paying users. So that is one of them. The next one is it multiplies the number of daily organic installs. Look, we're in an environment where $2, $5, $8, $15 cost per install is what people are paying. The publicly traded companies or heavily funded companies can afford to see a 12 or 18-month return on marketing spend. Smaller companies such as us, we can't afford that. We don't have deep enough lungs. So our organic users are massively impactful to our business. And if you just assume that you get, let's say for round numbers, 500 organic installs every day for an app that you have live, if you can multiply that times 5 apps, that means now you're getting 2,500 organic installs into your network. So now we're starting to view things as, instead of LTV, retention, and monetization for an app, you're viewing it in a network. And those organic installs really feed into a much larger set of players to monetize. We'll get into cross-promo later, but obviously that comes into play pretty significantly here. This is where we get into the brands and the public domain. In a situation where click-through rate and conversion rate are the two biggest levers on your marketing, when things are highly recognizable or very highly searched, the result is more users at a cheaper cost, many of which are free. So in the previous example, it was bingo, blackjack, video poker, whatnot, all resulting in 5 times the organic installs. When you layer themes that are recognizable and searched on top of that, there we go, pretty much doubles, we've found. Lil Wayne, it much more than doubled it, because Lil Wayne is one of the biggest search terms in the Google Play Store, mostly for music, obviously, but people still get excited to see that brand. Plus, it opened up a whole new audience for us. Like, the hip-hop audience isn't notorious for being into slots games. The quality of the user we found was a little lower than we were used to, but it did open up a brand new audience that we could convert into players in our other games. Other big public domain things you don't have to pay for, but are perfectly usable. Fairy tales, so Cinderella, Snow White, things like that. The Bible, it is actually the #1 search term in the Play Store. So we made slot machines out of Bible stories. We've been criticized for it. It is pretty weird, but let me just say that demographic converts a lot better than the Lil Wayne demographic. Yeah, right-wing, middle American Christians love slots. It's just a fact. The 3 brands that resonated best with our audience when tested were Coca-Cola, Budweiser, Harley-Davidson, and then the Bible. So that's pretty telling. Shakespeare, all very famous plays, from Hamlet to Romeo and Juliet, recognizable, beloved by many, and all perfectly usable. You can't necessarily use the art or the look and feel of other games that have used the public domain, but you can use the concepts, you can use it in your marketing and whatnot. And it does make a difference. It significantly improves click-through rates, and it does also, from there, improve conversion rates. So that all results, for any performance buyers in here, that results in much lower cost per install, and also a higher number of free organics just due to the search terms. So moving on, this is not my best graph I've ever made, but still somewhat illustrative. The highest value of users are the users you get at launch. When you're in the top free or the new free category, when you just begin spending and it's the first people who are clicking on your creative and excited about it, that is a very, very valuable audience who hopefully you can retain for months and months and turn many of them into spenders. If you only have one app, you're only going to get the benefit of those users once. Obviously, you can continue spend and to grow that app in other ways, but you only capture those initial users once, and when you have multiple apps, you can capture it multiple times. If you're cross-promoting a lot, you'll find that the size of that initial user base does begin to shrink a little bit, but not in a way that's so meaningful that it's not, in our opinion, worth doing. So yes, you're multiplying the value of all of your launch installs. Now we kind of just went through this a little bit with the public domain and the recognizable themes, whether it's branded or not. We're in a very kind of, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, where we're used to seeing bulk discounts. If one thing costs $1, I don't want to pay $5 for 5. I feel like I should get a per unit discount if I'm buying in bulk. In web advertising, especially mobile advertising, the inverse is true. You actually have to pay more to buy in bulk. If you want volume, if you want to scale, you have to increase your cost per install and your price per unit instead of decrease it. That is very counterintuitive and problematic, and it really removes a lot of smaller players from being able to compete. But that is on a single app basis. So just looking at the map, if you want to buy, we're going to go round numbers, roughly 10,000 installs in one app, you're going to have to spend $4 or $5 per install. In many cases more, maybe 6 or 7. But if you spread those out and you're buying 10,000 per app, then you're getting $6 or $7 CPI, 10,000 installs an app. So that's 50,000 installs going into your network at a $6 or $7 CPI. Whereas if you try to do 50,000 installs in one app, your CPIs would be $12, $15, $18, which is really prohibitive to a lot of smaller companies. So if you can spread those out across multiple apps, the cost per install at scale is much, much lower than if you were trying to funnel 10,000, 20, 50,000 people into one app on a daily basis. Also, charting is a huge part of our business. Everybody knows that you can spend a lot of money and buy a ton of users, and the velocity of installs gets you up to the top of the charts. The real value of that comes from the number of organics that you get when you're at the top of the charts. If you have one app and you chart it every month, each month you're going to get less and less and less organics as you go, because it's a lot of tired eyeballs. So just going back to the quality of the launch installs, people that are most likely to install an app are the ones that are most excited to see it for the first time. The next time you get to the top of the charts, sure, there will be new people who may not have seen it, or if they see it a second time, maybe they're more willing to jump on it at that point. But the size of your organic lift for every burst campaign, every subsequent burst campaign, decreases meaningfully over time. But if you're bursting a new app every month, one that people haven't seen, or maybe once every 4 or 5 months, then the organic lift that you get from the burst campaign stays relatively constant. These aren't real numbers, it's more illustrative, but you can kind of see how if you have 5, 6, 7 apps and you burst those, you can still burst on a monthly basis, but capture a lot more value than if you're bursting the same app on a monthly basis. And also, and this has gotten a fair amount of conversation so far this weekend or this week, cross-promotion is huge. If you only have one app and you detect that you're about to use that user, maybe they haven't come back in the last 7 days, maybe they spent 30 days ago but they haven't spent and they're clearly becoming less engaged, the logical thing to do would be to try to retain them in some way. But a lot of people find that you can't retain them within an app. So that's when, and this was on the last panel, but that's when people will sell them off to other advertisers. But if you can sell them off, and I put that in air quotes, to keep them within your own network, you're increasing your in-network retention, presumably increasing your in-network monetization, and therefore significantly increasing your LTV. Again, we're viewing this not on an individual app basis, but on a network basis. So historically with one app, if you lose a user, they're gone, you've presumably lost them forever. But with a network of apps, you can bump them from app to app to app to app and just keep them circling around your network. And again, like I said, therefore increasing your retention, your monetization, and ultimately your LTV. Okay, shelf space. It's another huge thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. It's business school 101 type stuff. Companies, brands will pay for prime shelf space in any retail store, whether it's a grocery store or a pharmacy. And then strategically on top of that, they'll try to get all of their sub-brands next to each other to really own eye level of a shelf in a store. When we're talking about the app stores, owning that shelf space is something that's really never given any play. But if you look at this is 2 Saturdays ago, I believe. Again, you can't argue with the success of Double Down, but they were number 3 in the top 16, which is precisely 2 scrolls with your thumb. owning 6.25% of the shelf space. Meanwhile, Caesars, which developed their own slots game, or Playtika did, bought Playtika, bought Pacific Interactive, which is House of Fun, and bought Bingo Blitz. They own 25% of the shelf space. So if I'm a user looking for a casino game and I'm scrolling through this store, there's a 25% chance that I'm going to select a Caesars Interactive game. There's nobody else in casino like that, and that is a pretty amazing place. And they've done that for less than the $500 million purchase price of Double Down by IGT. So that's something that, again, I don't think gets quite enough attention, but is massively, massively important. Sorry. So okay, those are the benefits, things we love about the choice we made, and things we like about someone like Caesars having done something similar through a roll-up. Now I'm going to talk about the drawbacks. I'll be very frank with the things we face on a daily basis, the times my co-founder and I look at each other and wonder if we made the right decision, though I certainly think we did. It multiplies the content needs. I'll just jump to that. So where a Double Down has one app and they're always feeding in new slot machines into the app, they can focus on just getting maybe one new machine every 3 weeks or so. A new machine can cost $200,000 and take 3 months to develop. So if you have to do that across multiple apps, it gets very, very expensive. You're either going to try to get it done for less, therefore sacrificing a certain level of quality, or you're going to just be paying a fortune and taking a very long time to do it. So again, where Double Down can focus on one app, multiple machines, we have 5 slots apps, each with multiple machines. So we're basically multiplying our need for content if we expect to get a new machine out every 3 weeks by 5. So the art and machine design resources are really, really massive for us. And that is certainly a drawback and a cost to go along with all of the decrease in cost that I discussed before. There's no shared currency. Apple doesn't allow this. Google does, but it's not necessarily easy to do. And Apple just flat out bans it. So you're not allowed to share currency between apps. As we all know, the user's relationship with your virtual currency is the biggest indicator of their ability or their willingness to monetize. So if you have users very frequently using a currency between games, they develop an affinity for it, they really start to understand the value of it, and they're more likely to purchase it for real money. Whereas if you have them bouncing between your games, which is good in a network, they're interacting with a different currency within each game, and therefore the bond to the currency is not nearly as strong as it is within a single game. And then the rest of it really focuses on focus, to be redundant. As a startup guy, one thing that I've definitely learned in my 10, 12 years of doing it is that the most important thing that you can drive home to a startup is focus. I think in the early stages we're all idea people, like what's going to be the big idea that makes this company successful, and everybody tries to be running in different directions, and the more you focus people in on one concept and have kind of themes that help people make decisions, the better your startup is going to be. And when you have 5, 6, 7, 10 apps, things naturally become very unfocused. So I went reverse there, but this is our very first slots machine that we made in 2009, I think, like December of 2009. Didn't know a damn thing about slots. The concept of slots math was unknown to me. The concept of animations and how important they are in sounds was completely unknown to us, and this is what we came up with, and it was terribly performing and ugly and basically useless. Slow versus fast. So the idea was, and this is actually something that we still use, but if you give a user a sense of control, they're more likely to stick with the game. So they could make it spin fast or slow. It didn't change the math by any stretch, but certain users liked fast versus slow. Meanwhile, if you look at what I believe this is House of Fun, they were just focused on one app, slots only, and really, really nailing that. And they didn't start so well. Like, their games were ugly and didn't look so good at the beginning. They didn't perform so well, but they focused, and this is what they came up with, and a massive acquisition to Caesars. So I think the results of focusing on one product can be very clearly evident. Though, to be fair, our games no longer look like this. So I think there are ways around it, and I'll get into that with our engine. So we do have multiple apps, but it's not multiple tech stacks. It's not multiple code bases. Everything goes into one central infrastructure, and within that we have a slots engine. Around that we have a casino engine. So everything's modularized from your socials. It could be gifting, it could be achievements, it could be questing. That's all a module within our engine. We can kind of mix and match and swap things out in each individual game. And then within that is our slots engine, which has different reel sets. So tumbler machines, stacked wild machines, traditional 3-reel machines, whatever it is. Different math sets that correspond to the reel sets. Then obviously the art that goes on top of it and the animations that go on top of that. Anytime there's a new animation or a fix to an animation, anytime there's a new set of reels or a new math, it goes into the engine and it can be distributed out to all of our games or any games we choose at once. So that really does help with the focus. And obviously, according to the graphic, bug fixes go into the engine, not into each individual game. So we're not expending development resources or product resources in a kind of decentralized way, even though we have a decentralized model. Engineers are all working on the engine, and then that engine is distributed out to multiple apps. It really does help us. This is actually our third build, well, our second build of our engine, our third build overall. And we've just found ourselves to be much, much more efficient with this approach to the decentralized model. Other drawbacks, marketing focus, and we haven't found a solution to this yet. The engine definitely helps with controlling product and development resources, but with a small marketing team, we're only 4 people, it's really, really difficult to effectively market this many apps. So what we've done is we've started to work more with partners in a somewhat agency-like manner to just say, look, these are your KPIs, this is your budget this month, you take this app and you focus on it. In some cases, we've worked with people to where they just take certain geos, where we're like, we want to own US and Australia, you can have UK, Canada, Germany, and France. We found both to be effective, but in a situation where we really are trying to capture institutional knowledge and have that user acquisition team in-house, we're not building that as much as we'd like, though we are hiring to try to change that so we can manage more. And to that point, because there are a ton of benefits that we've certainly enjoyed over the last 3 years, we don't necessarily have to stay with this strategy. If we find that one of our new games or one of our old games, which we're currently experiencing, starts to inflect, we can double down on that and focus on that game, but still with the broad, stable, and sturdy platform and foundation underneath it, so I'll give you the example. Right now, our bingo game is just growing much quicker than it used to be. It's retaining users better, it's monetizing better, and we're kind of looking at it going, we should probably focus a little more of our attention on this bingo game, which we are. Doesn't mean that the other games are being neglected because, like I said before, everything goes into the engine, so things are still being supported, but it does allow us now to focus more on the bingo game while still getting the benefit of all the organic users and the multiple bursts and things like that underneath it. So that is my attempt at being very biased, or unbiased, excuse me, and being pretty honest about the headaches we have, but also the clear benefits from having a suite of games. Do you want to do Q&A?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Because this is a topic that I have spent way too much airtime on with a lot of my clients. And one of the other, and I just want to know your opinion of this, one of the reasons why I've also gone towards your model is when you have an integrated app with games that are so different, like poker, bingo, slots. They have such different um, mathematics behind the game, that it's harder to manage your economy. So you can run a tighter economy by actually having them separate. They're like, especially in the early days when Double Down, they all screwed up their economy at least once,
Yeah.
and, which is why you see, like, you know, when you buy for $5, you get like 10 million coins. I mean, they screwed up on one game and then had to like create like inflation in order to fix it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you find that you are able to manage the economy tighter by having the multiple apps?
Definitely, and we didn't realize it because we only had, you know, one game and one app. But recently we put slots into our video poker app,
It's hard.
and we didn't break the economy, thank goodness,
Yeah.
but it was definitely challenging and something we hadn't thought about prior. So going back to, I guess, this slide, not being able to share currency does have a benefit as well as being a drawback to a certain extent.
Yeah, I found that.
Any other questions?
Here? Do you have a question? Oh, no. Okay.
Okay.
So you mentioned earlier that one of the benefits is if you want to buy, say, 100,000 users, you don't buy them all in one game, you buy like 10 lots of 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't necessarily 100,000 unique users. So how do you work around like the idea of paying for users more than once? Because once you got them in, you just cross-promote them. And
They're not necessarily unique users, but the majority of them certainly are. And we'll pay for a user to come into our network twice, for sure. They might not know that they're within one network initially, but they will eventually, and we see a lot of people spend in multiple games.
okay, so that's just cost of doing business.
Exactly.
Oh,
Like
fair
you're
enough.
dead on. It does happen. You might pay for a user more than once, but it's fine with us.
Fair enough.
We
Thank
build
you.
it into the model.
Do you use any of the same, so I see you have multiple slot content, those
Mhm.
apps. Do you use any of the same games to populate another one? So let's say majority of the people never make it all the way up to the food chain to the unlock the last games. Do you use those games maybe in to see the beginning of the next game, or any cross content?
Do you mean like using the machines across games?
Even a skin of the same game.
Yeah. We haven't yet, but we will be soon.
Makes sense.
Because we're finding some machines just perform better than others, all within the same app. So we're actually building an app with all of our top performing machines.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that will make for cross promotion much more easily into the new app.
I kind of find King did that a little bit.
Yeah, no, they do it very well. Yeah.
You guys have a few different, slots applications. How do you break out, or how do you decide to develop a new game or a new application as opposed to just content stuffing your single application? Like, is it divided by content, like mathematics, or what is it?
So, I mean, it's been a lot more of an art than a science historically. We've kind of, like with Lil Wayne, we wanted to try a whole new demographic. With the Bible and fairy tales and Shakespeare, it was just like, we think that this public domain stuff would work well with who we know are good slots players. So that's kind of how we've grown to date. But kind of like I was just saying, moving forward, we're going to take a much smarter approach to it. One of those approaches might be cross promo, and the other might be these machines perform best. Let's group them into one game. So yeah, that's how we're making moves on our slots content.
Got it. Thank you.
Just on an ancillary, related but not related, in the real money gaming, the biggest internet gaming operators often have a suite where they kind of funnel players because they know exactly when those players are going to churn off.
Yeah.
So then they'll just send them a promotion to the next casino just to keep them in
Yeah.
the suite.
And knowing when those players are going to turn off is certainly the hard part.
Yeah.
But part of the learning curve.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you.